Hello folks, welcome to Mesoamerica, your place for Mesoamerican occult knowledge, magic and culture. This episode is another one of these modern episodes. I would like to speak to you a little bit about these writers that are talking about how wokeness is starting to resurrect some of the pagan gods, and how these pagan gods are of the devil or even Satan himself. This, I think, is a resurrection to more persecution and to the erroneous facts about what did our cultures and religions stood for. Thank you very much, and let's go. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. Why did the Spanish spend so much time and effort at trying to demonize the Mesoamerican religions? This happened out of greed. The Spanish could have not conquered the people from Mesoamerica by mere sword and even disease. The people from Mesoamerica were very close and intertwined with their religion. It was one within themselves. And so it was a very difficult task that the Spanish had ahead of us for trying to eradicate the culture and the magic and the religion of the people from Mesoamerica. But they needed to do this in order to transform the culture and even the people and even the land into what they could manipulate, they could mold within themselves. And a clear example of how did they do this and why did they do this comes from Pablo de Beaumont. Fray de Beaumont, he said that the Aztec gods in this instance, they wanted to harm and destroy their families. And of course, they used the part of the Mesoamerican religion of sacrifice to say, do not let your children be sacrificed, turn to Christ. Whatever Christ was. I don't think those people back then understood who the real Christ was. Today, we don't understand really what really Christ was. The more we find books on Christ, the more complex Christ becomes. And the more the message of Christ, or even if there was a Christianity, starts to become a little blurry. But it was necessary for this Spanish phrase and conquistadors, or the Spanish crown, to be able to take possession not only of the land, but also inside the minds of the people from Mesoamerica. That was the most important part, because the people from Mesoamerica were the driving force for the work that happened to transform Mexico Tenochtitlan, or the many other cities in Mesoamerica, into what would later become New Spain and later became Mexico. But what does that have to do with us? What does that have to do with today, with our very day? Well, a lot. A lot has to do to our very day with the extermination and extinction of the Mesoamerican cultures. And this does not only apply to Mesoamerican cultures, it applies to any other culture. The Celts, the Vikings, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans, you name it. There have been so many religions and so many different cultures that were exterminated by the Catholic Church and their armies. So many. To this very day, it is very difficult for us to find any type of esoteric or even religious thought out that is as complex as it was. If it had not been for the Catholic Church, we would have been able to find probably thousands. There have been many different religions, there have been many different types of gods, many different cultures, and this type of persecution exterminated or blurred them to the point in which it is up to this day that there are 6 billion people on Earth, and we have one of the greatest tools of information sharing that has ever existed on this planet. that we're able to somehow try to make sense of what happened to those previous cultures. We're able to somehow to dig some of the archaeological remains and some of the books that have been hidden for a very long time. And we're able to somehow try to piece together a lot of the evidence of what happened to those people 500 years ago. And this also is in due fact to the fact that the Catholic Church no longer has this firm grasp on society. But to this very day, we capitalize the word God, like G-O-D, but we do not capitalize the word gods. There's a very clear reason for this. Because the word God is the monotheistic Christian, mostly Christian or Catholic Christian perception of God. But the word gods is always denoted to a pluralism that has its origins in pagan beliefs, either Mesoamerican or Egyptians or Roman or Greek or you name it. And therefore, this example is only one of thousands. There are many different aspects of our culture that are indicative of the influence that the ideologies of the Catholic Church had upon our cultures. Because the Catholic Church was everywhere. It was in Asia, it was in Africa, it was of course in Europe, and it was in the Americas, it was everywhere. And their influence permeated everywhere, and so did their persecution and the culture of eradication within the cultures. You know, like we hear sometimes stories about Native American kids being buried in Canada or here in North America because they will not assimilate to the Western way of life, shall we call it. And the reason why they were burned there, they were buried there because they were adopted by churches, and the churches were unable to transfer them from the Indian, not even Indians, are Native Americans, from their Indian way of life into a Western ideology. And the church, of course, being one of the bases for Western education, or should I say indoctrination, was in charge of trying to somehow convert or like mentally convert these children into Western people. And, this failed, and of course they killed them and probably torture them for a while and then kill them and bury them. And this is a synopsis of what is happening to our minds. If we don't convert ourselves, or we don't subjugate ourselves to the Western way of thinking, therefore we are not purposeful within the society, and if we're not purposeful within the society, we must be exterminated. And so therefore the ideas of paganism are a nuisance to our today Western world, are a nuisance to the church, are a nuisance to many other aspects of Western control, as we are now. Of course, you have to be educated within the standards of Western education. Women must be able to get a job so that in order for us to be able to survive. We need to obey by certain rules and do not deviate from certain standards, and die peacefully without ever raising our voices. And this is the indoctrination of the Western world, and anything outside of those bounds, it is just absolutely punishable to the point of death, like these children not too long ago, almost 100 years ago. This happens to this very day also in Guatemala, where the indigenous people from Guatemala, they wanted to go back to live in their old traditions, and they were exterminated by the Guatemalan government. To this very day, it is very difficult to live under Native American standards. The government does not provide any help or any assistance as far as hospitals or schools. It just does not know what to do with those people. And so therefore, when certain people, certain authors start to speak about how wokeness are resurrecting the pagan gods, it is because they want to oppress this cultural renaissance. And the reason why is because they don't know what to do with it. And if they don't know what to do with it, they cannot control it. And if they cannot control it, they cannot profit from it. And so therefore, this type of persecution, it is another chapter in the 500 years of persecution that just for the Mesoamericans, for the Greeks, for the Romans, for the Egyptians, that's even longer. And so we must not allow ourselves to do that. But where does this eradication of paganism has its basis? People will say Christianity. Of course, Christianity has to be the one and true faith, but most of us don't even understand what Christianity is. The multidimensional aspects of Jesus is vast and diverse. Most people only read what they're told to read. The Gospels of the New Testament, a little bit of the Old Testament, and they only believe what they are told from the pulpit. Very few of us bother to go read the whole Bible. Very few of us bother ourselves to read the new archaeologically discovered Gospels to try to understand who really was Jesus. There are so many questions that I had when I first read the New Testament, particularly the book of Revelations. So many questions. There are so many different definitions, and the dragon, the great harlot, the chains, the 7 days. It's just like there's so much symbolism behind there, and we are told to believe whatever the priest tells us to believe. He doesn't know. He does not know, because either he has not read the apocryphal or the newly discovered gospel, like the Gospels of the Nag Hammadi, the Dead Sea Scrolls, or the Pistis Sophia, or the Book of Jude. There are so many different Gospels that try to explain the experience of Christ and his disciples and what was he really trying to say. If we were to read it, we'll be able to have an understanding and a lot more tolerance for pagan religions. Because once we get into the nitty-gritty of Christianity, there are a lot of angels. In fact, they're not even angels, they're called eons. And there are a lot of demons, they're called archons. There are many multiple dimensions to Christianity. And if those people don't even understand their own Christianity, what right do they have to try to demonize paganism? And this is a very obvious attempt at just trying to destroy a form of thought and religion and culture for the sake of just destroying it without even knowing it or understanding it. If they cannot even understand their own religions, how will they bother, or why will they even just venture in trying to investigate the cultures and religions of Mesoamerica or any other culture? Let me give an example. Tlaloc. Tlaloc is the god of rain and the god of water for the Aztecs. Now, Tlaloc was a palpable god. He was probably an archetype. You cannot see it maybe as a god, because maybe their definition for the people from Mesoamerica of God was different from our own definition of what a god is. But what we do know is that they certainly use gods as forms of archetypes for nature in this example. Tlaloc, for example, being the god of rain, it was a palpable god. In southern Mexico, there are seasons for rain, particularly during the fall. During the fall, there are seasons where there's a lot of rain. Some of it has to be conserved in order to try to water the plants, or for harvesting, and for many other different reasons. And so therefore, the archetype of Tlaloc was certainly useful. It was certainly palpable. It was something that we could feel on our faces when it falls from the sky. Now, the archetype of Jesus can be molded into whatever it is that the powers that may be decide to place upon it, whatever it is. It can be now, like for example, now there are some politicians that are claiming that there is a certain type of Messiah. There are certain, religions that they think that they can speak for Jesus, whatever they think Jesus is. They don't understand Jesus, but of course want to speak for the archetype as to whatever it is that archetype has been molded for the last almost 2,000 years. They certainly want to take upon that archetype and mold it into whatever they want to try to manipulate people. And so therefore, my people, I would like to ask you, let's be rational about this. If we call ourselves Christians, let's try to investigate as to who really was Jesus and what really was Christianity for the people that created it. Not for what people today tell us that it is, but what it is for what it really is, what it really was for the people that created it. And for those people that try to demonize our Mesoamerican gods, at least try to understand it. At least try to understand where they come from, what are they for, what did they really do. Do not listen too much to the modern narratives as to what it is, but try to listen to the facts. If there's anything that I'm doing in this YouTube channel, is to try to bring awareness to these Mesoamerican gods and to the Mesoamerican culture. These I do by basing myself from source books, from articles published, from multiple magazines by archaeologists from NIAH, and from UNAM, one of the oldest and biggest universities in this continent. And so therefore, let's try to be a little bit tolerant. Do not believe wokeness into demonology or whatever it is that they want to base themselves on. Let's try to be a little bit more accepting, a little bit more loving, and then just, if people conform within the bounds of this Western way of life, you know, why will they want to punish us? Why will they want to oppress us? Thank you very much for another one of your minutes for attention. Have a great one. Thank you. Be blessed. Bye-bye.